Hi guys, so chapter 1021 One Piece just came out, and this chapter features what is probably going to be Robin's undisputed best fight in the series thus far. Not that there's much competition on that front, but yeah, it's pretty good. I'll take what I can get. Um, and it does feel pretty conclusive compared to the other like Toby Robo fights so far. But we'll get into that because first there is a cover page that I want to briefly talk about because it's probably the best one we've seen in a while. And that's saying something because like the one with like page one and Ulti playing with like the stuffed dinosaurs, whatever. I really like that one, but this one takes the cake because it is Franky and Señor Pink hanging out at a bar, presumably discussing a woman named Russian, but because obviously at the end of Franky's fight with Señor Pink, he was kind of like, well, we'll go out for a drink sometime and discuss a woman named Russian. Which I kind of figured would happen in like an epilogue or something, like towards the end of the series. Maybe after all the Straw Hats have disbanded or whatever, after Luffy became the king of the pirates, maybe go their separate ways. I mean, we get a little scene with Frankie going out to the bar with Senior Pink, and I actually also kind of recently wanted to get like expand the bar scene, get Frankie, Senior Pink, Denjiro, and Sasuke all going out and being drinking buddies. Um, just because recently, when Denjiro and Sasuke met, we found out that they were drinking buddies, and since obviously Frankie ended up being Sasuke's opponent, um, I thought maybe we'd get a similar situation where like Frankie and Sasuke would develop some sort of manly respect for each other by the end of the fight, and he would be like, "Oh, we'll go out for a drink," and then he would tag along to the big drinking adventure until the end. But the fact that we're getting this as a cover page now makes me think that we're probably not going to get it in the actual series, which is unfortunate. I definitely would have liked to see that scene fleshed out, like a full like interaction type thing rather than just like a panel. But I'll take what I can get. This is definitely pretty much what I would expected. Frankie bawling his eyes out like usual with the yeah, as he historically has done with sad stories. Um, but yeah. But with that being said, on to the actual chapter, which picks up pretty much right where I left off with the Robin and Black Maria fight. Robin having just summoned her Gigantifloors. But yeah, she goes in for a tech called Sea Serpent, which I think is very visually interesting because it kind of like it's very evocative of like a Luffy technique. It's the snake shot one. I think it's what it's called, where it kind of make like he kind of made a claw kind of thing. He used it against Hody Jones in Fishman Island. I don't know if he ever used it again, but it was kind of a wavy snake little thing, and he like grabbed like his heart or something, or he didn't like literally like pierce through his chest and grab his heart, but like he grabbed like roughly around where his heart would be on his chest. Um, it looks very similar to that. Even like it goes in like a little twisty fashion, and the arms definitely do like look like they stretch and get longer. So that's very interesting. And I guess since the Gigantesco Mano or whatever they're called, since they're made out of smaller hands, I guess it makes sense that she would be able to make them stretch longer because she just has to make more hands at the base, I guess. But yeah, so that was just a little interesting thing visually, I guess. Let's see. Black Maria attacks the limbs, and she figures out that with the Hana Hana no Mi, if you attack the limbs that it produces, the user also gets the damage transferred to them. So she's like, oh, you're pretty much just a bigger target. So yeah, she uses a web, catches the big Gigantifloor's form of Robin, and starts beating the crap out of it with her iron knuckles. That we saw, not iron knuckles, brass knuckles. I mean, maybe they're made out of iron, but I'll just assume they're brass knuckles. She used the brass knuckles that she used against Sanji when he was like crucified on the web or whatever. She brings that out. She says she's a martial artist at heart, which I think is kind of interesting. And she just goes to town on this giant robin, which is in this scene and also in some later scenes. I think later, I'm trying to find it. I don't know. Yeah, she like this giant woman with the brass knuckles and an ancient zone, which, by the way, ancient zones give you this biggest like physical power boost of any of the zone types, possibly excepting certain mythical zone types, but those are obviously an exception in their own right. She is just beating the crap out of Robin. Not even like the gigantic version of her. This time, like just straight up the normal sized Robin, which is pretty crazy. Just because historically, we Oda doesn't typically draw her female characters receiving too much damage. Um, look at both Nami fights, for example. She didn't really get like beat up with like blunt things or whatever. She got like in the Caliphate fight, she got hit with like two finger pistols, I think. And similarly in the Miss Double Finger fight, she got pierced with the needles a few times, but that's it. Just a couple piercing attacks. In the grand scheme of things, didn't really do that much damage, and she was pretty much fine afterwards. Um, but by comparison, Robin is just getting the crap beat out of her, and you know it's got to hurt because of how just giant Black Maria is and how physically powerful uh, ancient zone types are. So that's very interesting, and I like that fact. Um, but also the spider itself seems to have a lot of interesting abilities. Obviously, we already know that it can produce webs. We saw last chapter that it can produce illusions somehow. That never really got explained, but I guess that's kind of just a thing. Unless that was one of the Smile people doing it, but I don't think it was. I think it was said to have been Black Maria. I could be wrong. But yeah, got the illusions, got the webs, got the poison coming out of the legs, and the spider can also breathe fire for some reason, which is convenient because the webs are also extremely flammable, apparently. So I guess that's nice. Nice combination there. Gives some nice utility, but yeah, a lot of powers coming from the spider, which is interesting because typically when it comes to zoans, like it's usually just you transform into the animal. When the animal actually has like an extra ability, it tends to be a mythical zoan. Obviously, like Marco, you don't just turn into a phoenix. You also get the regeneration ability. With Orochi, you don't just turn into the whatever it's called, Yamato no Orochi. I think that's what it's called. You don't just turn into that. You also get some immunity to decapitation. In theory, we don't actually have that confirmed, but based on the fact that he's been decapitated multiple times now, I think we can assume that that's been the case. And you know, so on and so forth. Well, it's nine-tailed fox. You can transform into other people, etc., etc. But that doesn't usually tend to be the case with actual just straight up zones, even of the ancient variety, which are of a higher class. But the Rosabageli, Grovageli, or whatever it's called, seems to have multiple abilities. Obviously, I can understand the shooting webs. I can even understand the poison, but the illusion of the fire kind of seems like a stretch. But you know, I'll take what I can get. It definitely makes it more of an interesting fight to see that she has so much utility, and seeing Robin, I guess, counter it. Because Robin definitely has a very strong utility ability. But it's not very good for fights. In the past, it's very much been the case that either she can beat an opponent in one shot by just snapping their neck, or they're just too powerful to have their neck broken or spine broken with Robin's limbs, or they can just evade that easily or something like that. So there really hasn't been much room for kind of a back and forth kind of fight. Yama was an exception because Robin wasn't actually fighting back for like the majority of that fight. She was trying to lure him away from the ruins, and the second she got him away from the ruins, she just instantly wrecked him. And so it's interesting to see. It's like, I think the reason it's able to go on so long is because these two have such utility-based abilities. Like, obviously, if Black Maria's thing didn't have all this stuff, and it was just straight up just a straight up power booster like all the other or not mythical, ancient zones, we probably this fight probably would have been a lot more short lived because there wouldn't have been as much room for a back and forth kind of interaction here. Um, so I think that's good that he was able to, even if like the spider breathing fire might be a stretch. I think it was definitely good for the sake of getting a solid Robin fight out of this. Um, but yeah, moving on to that. From that, what else do we get? We get a flashback actually to Robin's time with the Revolutionary Army. Um, I don't know how many of these we've got actually. I mean, obviously, we've gotten a few Rayleigh flashbacks with Luffy. We got Zoro learning hockey, I think, in Dressrosa. We got Sanji learning Skywalk when he first used it in Fishman Island. Um, Other than that, I don't know if we get any flashbacks to these people's time, the Straw Hats' time during the time skip and how they learned certain techniques. I could be wrong though. So yeah, nice to see. Obviously, we get more screen time with Koala and Sabo. They try to teach her some more martial arts techniques so she can basically like actually have a bit more use for her limbs than just breaking necks and backs and whatnot. Sabo tries to teach her the Dragon Claw, but I assume she never actually learned that. She doesn't use it in this chapter if she did. But yeah. And also Koala teaches her some Fishman Karate technique, some sort of palm base attack that we actually saw before back when the ship was going down to Fishman Island, pretty much right on the time skip. She used the palm attack to like change the course of the ship by like hitting a big rock or whatever. But yeah, so we saw that briefly before, but we didn't really know it was such a big deal apparently. So she uses this palm attack. She strikes the ceiling. Ceiling starts crumbling, and it sets out the fire. And once that happens, we get probably I guess the ultimate attack type thing of Robin, the demonio, something floors, which is essentially the Gigantifleurs, but she has giant, bat wings and horns and whatnot. But what's particularly interesting about this form is that it's blacked out, and I don't know if the implication here is just that it's armament hockey. I don't think it's armament hockey. I feel like if, I mean, it might be like a similar case to like Zoro, because we know now that Zoro was using Conqueror's Haki, or at least it's implied that whenever Zoro used Ashura, he was using Conqueror's Haki, and that's kind of the explanation for why he didn't use it very often, because look at like Sanji's Diablo Jambe. Once he learned that, he used it like every other fight he had. Like he'll just use it whenever, and for years Luffy just uses that whenever. In both those fights both those power-ups that they got during Enies Lobby, the power-up that Zoro got during Enies Lobby was Ashura, and up until chapter 1010, he'd only used it twice in the series, at obviously at Enies Lobby, and again during the Pacifista on Sabadi. So I guess like the implication is that now that we know that Conqueror's Haki is that he couldn't actually really use it on command. It was just being backed into a corner, sort of brought out as late Conqueror's Haki, which is why he probably didn't use it as much post time skip. Because up until the fight on the rooftop with Kaido, I mean, really, was he challenged enough to have to use Conqueror's Haki? I don't think so. But yeah, so I think it could be a very similar situation here with Robin, where she does have armament Haki. She just can only use it in this one technique, and she doesn't really know she has it. And obviously we've seen Usopp start to develop observation Haki in a similar vein. Doesn't really know he has it, but we've seen him be able to use it. Or it could just be a weird lighting effect, which is a bit more of a boring excuse for the the sort of black shading. But it looks cool, so if that's it, I'll take it. But yeah, with this big giant demon form, she takes Black Maria and performs a grand jacuzzi clutch on her, once again breaking her neck slash spine slash something, whatever she does to her enemies typically. But yeah, and we do actually get a panel of Black Maria, a close up of her face on the ground with like the eyes whited out, which is it definitely, this fight compared to the fight with between Jinbei and Who's Who, and the fight with Franky and Sasuke, definitely feels more conclusive, just because of the development for Robin. I guess the fact that it was the way that Black Maria was like kind of berating her was very very like it kind of hit like all of Robin's character beats, I guess. Where like with Jinbei, by comparison, it was sort of like he was just kind of fighting well. Who's Who was just explaining something, and that was the whole fight pretty much. So this fight definitely felt more personal for Robin for one thing. It was definitely a bit of a longer fight. We got 2 chapters for it. We obviously the big thing, actually seeing Black Maria on the ground unconscious, to fully suggest that she is down for the count. I would say that she probably has a good chance of being down for the count. I would say her and Ulti, I would say probably are the best candidates for actually being down fully right now. But the other ones I'm still not too positive on. But the fact that Black Maria does seem down here might mean that the other ones are down for the count. The other Tobi-Roppo are down for the count as well, which would mean that all the Tobi-Roppo have been taken down now. But yeah. Very good fight. I am a big Robin fan, so this might be my favorite fight so far. But I really also like the Franky fight. Franky's fights are also just really fun, so I really like the Franky fight also. But I have to go with Robin on this one. While Robin is doing that, Franky just kind of casually takes out all the gifters and the number, the Kunyun, I think her name was, the number that was part of Black Maria's clique. With a big like slash that's shaped like a treble clef. I think it's called, what's the tech called? Phrase d'Armes Orchestra. So yeah, but that's like one-shotting a number is very impressive. Obviously we saw people like Drake could do it, Luffy could do it. I think Franky also one-shot one. But like, we have to remember that these are ancient giant size. Sometimes with perspective, it doesn't really look like it. But canonically, these were stated to be as big as oars. And oars is, like 60 meters tall. I think for reference, I'm pretty sure oars is like the exact same size, give or take a little bit, as the colossal titan from Attack on Titan, which. So like, for obviously the numbers aren't all exactly like the size of oars. Obviously we saw of the 3 we saw in like the festival hall, there was that one like really short and round one. So obviously they're not all the exact same size, but these are still very like huge creatures, comparable in size to oars, at the very least bigger considerably than a normal giant. So for Brook to casually one-shot one is pretty impressive. So yeah, like I'll take that, but I would still like to get an actual fight for Brook. But since he seems to definitely be more utility based, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get one. But man, a fight for Brook would be nice, since the only 1v1 he's gotten is against Zio on Fishman Island, and I don't really count the Fishman 1v1s, just because the Straw Hats straight steamrolled them pretty much. They really hardly count as fights. But yeah, but with that, we get on to the final scene of the chapter. As many people suspected, Carabao used his endless swamp pocket dimension thing to pull out all his supplies of food and feed Luffy. So it looks like he's getting back in the fight. And with the final scene of the chapter, we're on the final scene of the chapter already, but with like the final page, Momonosuke asks Shinobu to use the ripe fruit to age him up, so that he can be a bigger dragon or whatever and fly Luffy up to the back to Onigashima. So Shinobu does confirm that if this does happen, this would well, first of all, this has been a theorized thing for a while. I don't know the background of the theory. I think maybe it's just because Momonosuke is trying to live up to Odin. Maybe so if there's just like, oh, you gotta be an adult or whatever, or maybe it's because he skips 20 years. So there's just like, oh, well, if you age you up 20 years, you'll be the age you're supposed to be. I don't know what the evidence for this theory was, but I do know that it was a pretty common theory that Momonosuke would be aged up at some point during Wano. And it seems like it's at least being addressed here. Shinobu seems pretty apprehensive to do it, so I don't know if this will actually end up happening. But the fact that it was like the big cliffhanger makes it feel like if it didn't happen, or at least there's not some like dramatic back and forth that makes them decide not to do it, it would feel kind of like a cheating us out a little bit. But yeah, I don't really have anything like too crazy to say on that though. Obviously, if Momonosuke does get aged up, I don't want him to be like super powerful all of a sudden. Like I don't want him to be like Odin's strength, like or something. Like that would feel kind of like cheating. Just even if he does get aged up, I kind of just want him to do what he's been doing, kind of acting as a leader, but not necessarily doing any of the fighting. I could see him maybe, like, if he does get aged up, maybe cutting off the last head of Orochi or something. But if he does, like, end up fighting in his adult form, that's, like, the most I want him to do. I don't want him, like, fighting Kaido or anything, because it would just seem kind of cheap to age up Momonosuke and just be like, oh, you can fight Kaido now. Like, if that's the case, why not just age up Luffy to like 40? We're in like because like the prime of One Piece characters is when they're like 40, mid 40s or whatever. So like if we could just age up people this whole time, why not age up Luffy to 40? So like that kind of thing. It just feels a little bit cheap if Momonosuke finally suddenly just got incredible like physical strength and fight. Well, I don't mind if he gets physical strength, but he like even if it's comparable to Odin, but he still shouldn't like be able to fight on that same level as someone like Odin, just because he lacks like the skill or whatever, and he still is mentally the same person. But with that being said, I don't really have anything else to say on this chapter, but it was a very solid chapter, just due to the fact that it was a Robin chapter, and it got one heck of a fight, and the cover page, just everything about this chapter was really amazing. But with that being said, I will see you.